Good morning. I'm on my way to Maine because my friend's Sailboat engine needs a little bit of work. It's a Perkins 4.108 diesel engine and it has a couple issues. Number one, the rear main seal is leaking pretty badly. And number two, one of the exhaust manifold studs broke off pretty much flush with the cylinder head, so that needs to be extracted. If you've never seen the engine compartment on a sailboat, they are extremely tight, generally speaking. This one's no exception. So what we're going to do is pull the engine out, and I'm actually going to bring it home with me so I can work on it in my shop. That's why I'm driving my truck. All right, I've arrived at the boatyard, and it's going to be one of these boats around here somewhere, I'm pretty sure. This is it, 36 feet long and all wrapped up for the winter. Good look inside, pretty nice. And there's the engine right there. See how challenging it is to get out. This is the crane that we're going to use to get the engine out.
Well, hey.
Oh, we got a zip tie back here.
Zip tie?
Yeah,
Okay, is that good?
that's good.
Okay, I gotta...
We ended up having to pause for a bit to remove one of the motor mounts. Motor mount out.
Okay, a little bit more.
Keep going.
Yeah, a little bit. I think she's out of the hole.
Good still?
Yeah. We're doing the front edge good.
Yeah, we're good. Look at that.
Hold her right there. She's your baby now.
Well, we'll get it in place. Warning, don't even think about using starting fluid. Good idea. So I got the engine home. Now this is an all original engine from 1985 with about 3,600 hours on it. And my concern here is that if this engine has excessive blow-by, that could actually be causing the oil leaks on it. Blow-by is when combustion gases leak past the piston rings into the crankcase, therefore pressurizing the crankcase, which can force oil out of the cracks and various seals in places, causing leaks. I'm going to try to test for blow-by by getting this engine running, and so I have it hooked up to a battery and I have a makeshift fuel tank. This water pump here is not supposed to be run dry, so I'm just going to throw a garden hose in the bottom and that should lubricate it. If there is excessive blow-by, I expect to see it to come from here, the oil fill cap, in the form of excess pressure and perhaps even smoke in the worst case. Well, I didn't really see if there was any blow-by, but I'm going to grab a piece of paper to test for sure. Certainly, if there was any, it wasn't bad, because this cap wouldn't blow off on its own, but putting my hand there, it was hard to tell if it was vacuum sucking air in or if air was being blown out. All I could tell is that there was air moving there. So that piece of paper was being sucked up against the oil fill here by vacuum, and that tells me that this engine has a very clean bill of health. The piston rings are in good shape and it should have adequate compression. I should be able to go ahead and replace the rear main seal and hope that it doesn't happen again. If there was significant blow-by, the answer would be to rebuild this engine. Next, I need to remove the injection pump to get it sent off to a specialist for a rebuild. Before I can get to the rear main seal, I have to remove the transmission. Yep, definitely looks like we got a leaky rear main seal with all that oil in there. That came out, and then that is just covered with oil. Yeah, I can tell you right now that whoever installed these rear main seals last did a really bad job of it, and that's probably why it's leaking. So this is the upper half of the rear main seal, and right here is the old-fashioned rope type seal, and honestly, it looks like it was installed by an ape. So the ends of the seal here and here are supposed to be flush with the housing, and here they're recessed quite a bit. In fact, I can use my calipers to get a rough idea about how much, and that's about 30 thousandths of an inch. Now I'll show you guys the right way to install this later, but essentially you press it into place and then you cut the ends down to size, leaving it sticking out by 15 thousandths of an inch on either side. Then when you install the two halves together, it compresses it and it'll end up being flush. These would have left such a large gap that oil definitely would have been able to leak out pretty easily. Before I reinstall the seal, I talked to the owner about the oil pan gasket here, which kind of looks like it's leaking, although I'm not 100% sure because I think that the injection pump gasket was leaking and it could have dripped down and then spread out towards the back of the engine like that. Either way, I think the safest thing to do here is to pull the oil pan off and replace the gasket because it is pretty easy to do at this point. And especially considering how badly the rear main seal was installed, the same people also replaced the oil pan gasket and I think a bunch of other stuff, so they might have done a bad job on it. Okay, so this engine has quite a few leaks that need to be addressed. I think that the injection pump gasket was leaking, the oil pan gasket is leaking, and then over here on this side we have this gasket was leaking, and then this thing right here was leaking, but I tightened that up by hand, so hopefully that'll resolve that. This is what it looks like inside of the crankcase. We got a very weird looking crankshaft. As for this surface here, I went and scraped it up with a razor blade, wiped it down with acetone really well so that the new gasket adheres well. As for the oil pan, it's actually aluminum, so be really careful when you're scraping this surface with a razor blade. Okay, for these gaskets, I'm thinking just a very thin layer of RTV on this is going to help it seal. This cork gasket goes around here with a thin layer of RTV. Next, I figured I'd replace the gasket for the oil filter housing. Yep, it looks like this was leaking out of the bottom, I think. I love this stuff, Permatex high-tack gasket sealant, especially when it comes to cork and paper gaskets. The front timing cover also looks like it's a source of leaks. Oh, I feel a little bit silly because I didn't even need this puller for this. You can see this has been leaking from down here. There's the old front main seal removed. The new seal is coated on the outside, so you don't need to use any sealant. 1 3/4 socket. Should press this in evenly. Cool, that looks good to me. Okay, so I have this cork gasket here, and it leaked right here before, and what it looks like is it's like a piece of aluminum foil that's sandwiched between 2 pieces of cork. And I think that this might just leak again because it's kind of a low quality gasket. So I think we're gonna get better results if I just use RTV on this. So it's very important to center this seal relative to the crankshaft pulley, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this on, and that should allow me to center the seal. Slide it on very gently. Okay, that's good enough. Well, these bolts are barely even hand tight. I'm gonna let this dry for a little bit. We'll come back and tighten it later. Okay, next thing I want to tackle, this broken off exhaust stud. So there are 2 ways to remove a broken bolt or stud like this. Number 1 is to drill a hole in it and then try to use an extractor to remove it. Number 2 is my favorite way, and that is to weld a nut onto it. And the advantage there is that welding a nut onto it heats the bolt up a lot, which will break up any rust that might be in there, and then when it cools down, it should be a lot looser. I'm going to start by trying to add material to this to build it up. Not really sure if I got good enough penetration there, but I guess I'll just go ahead and try to weld this nut on and we'll see what happens. Worst case scenario, if it breaks off, then I just do it again. This might not be pretty because this nut is zinc coated, so yeah, don't breathe this stuff in. Okay, try number 1. I don't think this is gonna work, so let's see. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think the nut's gonna break right off. Yep. Okay, I'm gonna try a bigger nut this time. Well, there it is. While I'm at it, I decided it would be a good idea to replace all of the studs. Now this is what the traditional rear main seal looks like. This is actually like a rope type material. There's some sort of magic in the middle of there that's darker. I'm not really sure what it's made out of, but these engines are actually notorious for leaking at the rear main seal because of this design. What we've opted to do instead is use this new updated design, which is some new type of rope type seal, and hopefully it should resolve the oil leaks. Okay, step 1 is to take this rope and press it into this groove here, making sure to leave some sticking out on each end. It actually seems to fit pretty nicely. Before I get the ends here, I want to make sure the bottom is fully seated, and I'm going to use a socket or something like this to sort of roll it in. If it's not fully seated, you might see that it seats itself later on and sort of shrinks into place and leaves gaps here. That might have been what was done the last time this seal was installed. Okay, now I need to cut these ends off, leaving 15 thousandths of an inch sticking out, and that's about that much. It's not very much at all. I think it's easiest to get it level cutting from this side, but I don't want to push it out. So if I take a piece of wood and stick it on the back here, I can use that to hold it in place while I cut. Oh wow, it cuts very easily. Oh, that's nice. Beautiful. Look at that. Throw a little bit of assembly lube on this just to lubricate it while the seal is breaking in. That's a lot more than I needed, but that's okay. So these flywheel bolts are irregularly spaced so that the flywheel only fits on one way, which is important for balance. Okay, so I have a dial indicator here set up on the flywheel, zeroed out, and the maximum allowable run out is 12 thousandths of an inch, so I'm going to rotate the engine around and we're going to check that. 6 thousandths. All right, well that was less than a rotation. It's definitely well under 12 thousandths of an inch. There it is. Well, I got the engine all loaded up and here we are back at the boatyard. All right, engine's in place. The plan is for me to come out and film this thing on launch day and see how it works. Hopefully it doesn't leak anymore. Launch day. Engine sounds like it's running well. Once in the water, we would motor down the Piscataqua River to the Atlantic Ocean on our way to the marina. In order to get to the open ocean, we had several bridges to go under. With a mast height of 46 feet, we had to request one drawbridge to raise. There was a storm moving in behind us, and as we got to the open ocean, we encountered choppy conditions with large waves. Luckily, as we pulled into the marina, the waves settled down. This is the world's least organized outro ever. We made it back to the marina, the engine's running fine, we haven't detected any leaks, and we also didn't really get rained on, so everything's good. Thanks for watching.